begged on a bench. There was a meeting, and Dr. Mishra was standing up before a group of people. There were about 50 people coming there, and he talked on I am consciousness. Dr. Mishra talked and then gave Swami a grand introduction with a big smile. Quote, Swamiji is here, unquote, he said. And he swings around and waves his hand for a big introductions. It was beautiful. This was after Dr. Mishra spoke for about an hour. The Swami didn't speak. He sang a song. Afterward, I went up to him. He had a big smile, and he said that he likes young people to take to Krishna consciousness. He was very serious about it. He wanted all young people. So I thought that was very nice. It made sense, so I wanted to help. We stood there talking for about an hour. Mishra had a library in the back. And we looked at certain books, Arjuna, Krishna, chariots, and things. And then we walked around. We looked at some of the pictures of Swamis on the wall. By that time, it was getting very late. And Prabhupada said, come back the next day at 10 to his office downstairs. The next day, when Robert Nelson went to room 307, Prabhupada invited him in. The room was clearly not intended to serve as a living quarters. There was no toilet, no shower, no chair, no bed, no telephone. The walls were painted a dark, dismal color. Prabhupada showed Robert the 3-volume set of Srimad Bhagavatam, which Robert purchased for $16.50. Then Prabhupada handed him a small piece of paper with the Hare Krishna Mahamantra printed on it. Robert explained in his own words, while Swamiji was handing it to me, he had this big smile on his face like he was handing me the world. We spent the whole day together. At one point he said, quote, we are going to take a sleep, unquote. So he lay down there by his little desk. And so I said, quote, I'm tired too, unquote. So I lay down at the other end of the room and we rested. I just lay on the floor. It was the only place to do it. But he didn't rest that long, an hour and a half, I think. And we spent the rest of the day together. He was talking about Lord Chaitanya and the Lord's pastimes. And he showed me a small picture of Lord Chaitanya. Then he started talking about the devotees of Lord Chaitanya, Nityanand and Advaita. He had a picture of the 5 of them and a picture of his spiritual master. He said something in Sanskrit and then he translated. It wasn't much of a room though. You had really be disappointed if you saw it. So Robert Nelson couldn't give Prabhupada the kind of assistant he needed. Lord Chaitanya states that a person has his command 4 assets: his life, money, intelligence, and words, at least one of which he should give to service of God. Robert Nelson did not seem able to give his whole life to Krishna consciousness. And as for money, he had a very little. His intelligence was also limited, and he spoke unimpressively. Nor did he have a wide range of friends or contacts among whom to speak. But he was affectionate toward the Swami, and out of the 8 million people in the city, he was practically the only one who showed personal interest in him and offered to help. From his experience in the second record business, Mr. Robert, as Swamiji called him, developed a scheme to produce a record of Swamiji singing. People were always putting out albums with almost anything on them, he explained. And they would always make money, or at least break even. So it would be almost impossible to lose the money. It was a way he thought he could help make the Swami known. And he tried to convince Prabhupada of the idea. And Prabhupada didn't discourage Mr. Robert, who seemed eager to render this service. So Robert Nelson is explaining in his own word. Me and the Swami went around to this record company on 46th Street. We went there and I started talking. And the man was all business. He was all business and mean. They go together. So we went in there with a tape and we tried talking to the man. Swami was talking, but the man said he couldn't put the tape out. I think he listened to the tape, but he wouldn't put it out. So we felt discouraged. But he didn't say much about it. Prabhupada had been in business in India, and he wasn't about to think that he could suddenly take up business in a foreign country on the advice of a young boy in New York City. Besides, he had come not to do business but to preach. Robert, however, was enthusiastically offering service. Perhaps he wouldn't become a regular brahmachari student, but he had a desire to serve Krishna. For Prabhupada to refuse him would be perhaps to turn away an interested Western young person. Prabhupada had come to speak about Krishna, to present the chanting, and if Mr. Robert wanted to help by arranging for an American record album, then that was welcome. Mr. Robert and Swami made an odd combination. Prabhupada was elderly and dignified, a deep scholar of the Bhagavatam and the Sanskrit language, whereas Robert Nelson knew Swami to Bill and other friends. No. Whereas Robert Nelson was artless, even in Western culture, and inept in worldly ways. Together they would walk, the Swami wearing his winter coat with his imitations fur collar, his Indian dhoti and white pointed shoes. Mr. Robert wearing old khaki pants and an old coat. Prabhupada walked with rapid, determined strides, outpacing the lumbering, rambling, heavy-set body who had befriended him. Mr. Robert was supposed to help Prabhupada in making presentations to businessmen and real estate men, yet he himself was hardly a sleek fellow. He was innocent. So Robert explained, Once we went over to this big office building on 42nd Street, and we went in there. The rent was thousands of dollars for a whole floor. So I was standing there talking to the man, but I didn't understand how all this money would come. The Swami wanted a big place, and I didn't know what to tell the man. Prabhupada wanted a big place, and a big place meant a big price. And he had no money, and Robert Nielsen had only his unemployment checks. Still, Prabhupada was interested. If he were to find a building, that would be a great step in his mission. And this was also another way of engaging Mr. Robert. Besides, Krishna might do anything, give anything, or work in any way, ordinary or miraculous. So Prabhupada had his reasoning, and Mr. Robert has his. So Robert explained his view. The building was between 6th and Broadway on 42nd Street, some place to open Krishna's temple. We went in and up to the second floor and saw the renting agent, and then we left. I think it was 5,000 a month or 10,000 a month. We go to a certain point and the money was too much, and then we left. When he brought up the prices, I figured we had better not, we had to stop. On another occasion, Robert Nielsen took Prabhupada by bus to the Hotel Columbia at 70 West 46th Street. The hotel had a suite that Prabhupada looked at for possible use as a temple. But again, it was very expensive and there was no money. Sometimes Robert would make purchase for Prabhupada with the money from his unemployment checks. Once he bought orange-colored t-shirt. Once he went to Woolworths and brought kitchen pots and pans and some picture frame for Prabhupada picture of Lord Chaitanya and his spiritual master. Robert explained in his word, one time I wanted to know how to make chapati cakes. So Swami says, quote, $100 please for the recipe. $100 please, unquote. So I went and got some money, but I couldn't get $100. But he sold me anyway. He taught me to cook and would always repeat, wash hands, and quote, you should only eat with your right hand, unquote. And whoever met the Swami was almost always impressed. They would start smiling back to him, and sometimes they would say funny things to each other that were nice. The Swami's English was very technical, always. I mean, he had a big vocabulary, but sometimes people had a little trouble understanding him, and you had to help sometimes. The Paradox at 64th East 7th Street on the Lower East Side was a restaurant dedicated to the philosophy of George Oshawa and the macrobiotic diet. It was a storefront below street level with small dining table placed around the candlelit room. The food was expensive and well reputed. Tea was served free as much as you liked, more than just a restaurant. The Paradox was a center for spiritual and cultural interest, a meeting place reminiscent for the caps of Greenwich Village or Paris in the 1920s. A person could spend the whole day at the Paradox without buying anything, and no one would complain. The crowd at the Paradox was a mystical congregation interested in teaching from the East. When news of the new Swami uptown at Dr. Mishra's reached the Paradox, the word spread quickly. Harvey Cohen and Bill Epstein were friends. Harvey was a freelance artist and Bill worked at the Paradox. After Harvey had been to Prabhupada Place at Dr. Mishra's yoga studio a few times, he came by the Paradox and began to describe all about the new Swami to Bill and other friends. So in the words of Bill, he explained, I was working at the Paradox one night when Harvey came to me and said, quote, I went to visit Mishra and there is a new Swami there and he is really fantastic, unquote. Well, I was involved in microbiotics and Buddhism, so at first I couldn't care less. But Harvey was a winning and warm personality, and he seems interested in this. He said, quote, why don't you come uptown? I would like you to see this, unquote. So I went on one of the lectures on 72nd Street. I walked in there and I could feel a certain presence from the Swami. He had a certain very concentrated, intense appearance. He looked pale and kind of weak. I guess he had just come here and he had been through a lot of things. He was sitting there chanting on his beads, which is carried in a little bead bag. One of Dr. Mishra's students was talking, and he finally got around to introducing the Swami. He said, quote, we are the moons to the Swami's sun, quote, unquote. He introduced him in that way. The Swami got up and talked. I didn't know what to think about it at that time. The only step I had taken in regard to Indian teaching were through Ramakrishna. But this was the first time, to my knowledge, that Bhakti religion had come to America. Bill Epstein, quite in contrast to Robert Nielsen, was dashing, romantic person with long, wavy dark hair and a beard. He was good looking and effervescent and took upon himself a role of informing people at the restaurant of the city's spiritual news. Once he became interested in the new Swami, he made the Swami an ongoing topic of conversation at the restaurant. Bill, I went in the back and I asked Richard, the manager, quote, I'm going to take some food to the Swami. You don't mind, do you? He said, no, take anything you want. So I took some brown rice and other stuff and I bought it up there. I went upstairs and I knocked on the door and there was no answer. I knocked again and I saw that the light was on because it has a glass panel. And finally he answered. I was really scared because I had never really accepted any teacher. He said, quote, come in, sit down, unquote. We started talking and he said to me, quote, the first thing that people do when they meet is to show each other love. They exchange names, they exchange something to eat. So he gave me a slice of apple and he showed me the tape recorder he had, probably for recording his chants. Then he said, quote, "Have you ever chanted?" I said, quote, "No, I haven't chanted before," unquote. So he played a chant and then he spoke to me some more. He said, quote, "You must come back," unquote. I said, "Well, if I come back, I'll bring you some more food," unquote. James Green, a 30-year-old carpentry teacher at Cooper Union, was delving into Eastern philosophy. He lived on the same block as the Paradox and began hearing about the Swami from Harvey Cohen and Bill Epstein while regularly taking his evening meal at the restaurant. James, it was really Harvey and Bill who got things going. I remember one evening at Mishra's in which Swamiji was only a presence but did not speak. Mishra's student seems more into the bodily aspect of yoga, and this seems to be one of Swamiji's complaints. His room on 72nd Street was quite small. He was living in a fairly narrow room with door on the one end. Swamiji would sit himself up along one side, and we were rather closely packed. It may have been no more than 8 feet wide, and it was rather dim. He sat down on his thin mattress, and then we sat on the floor. We wouldn't chant. We would just come, and he would lecture. There was no direction other than the lecture on the Bhagavad Gita. I had read a lot of literature, and in my own way, I was looking for a master, I think. I have no aggression in me or go-getting quality. I was really just a listener, and this seems right, hearing the Bhagavad Gita. So I kept coming. It just seems as if things would grow from there. More and more people began coming. Then it got crowded, and he had to find another place. The new group from the Paradox was young and hip, in contrast to the older, more conservative uptown people who had been attending Prabhupada classes. In those days, it was still unusual to see a person with long hair and a beard. And when such people started coming to Swami's meeting on the west side, some of the older people were alarmed. As one of them noted, quote, "Swami Bhaktivedanta began to pick up another kind of people. He picked them up at the Bowery or some attics, and they came with funny hats and gray blankets wrapped around themselves, and they startled me." David Allen, a 21-year-old seeker who came up from the Paradox, had just moved to the city, optimistically attracted by what he had read about the experimentation with drugs. He saw the old group as a, quote, "a kind of first budgetary group of older women on the west side," unquote, listening to the Swami's lecture. David, we weren't known as hippies then, but it was strange for the people who had originally been attracted to him. It was different for them to relate to this new group. I think most of the teachers from India up to that time had older followers. And sometimes wealthy widow would provide a source of income. But Swamiji changed right away to the younger, poorer group of people. The next thing that happened was that Bill Epstein and others began talking about how it would be better for the Swamiji to come downtown to the Lower East Side. Things were really happening down there, and somehow they weren't happening uptown. People downtown really needed him. Downtown was right, and it was ripe. There was a life down there. There was a lot of energy going around. Chapter 6 on the Bowery. Srila Prabhupada in the conversation, he said, I couldn't understand the difference between friends and enemies. My friend was shocked to hear that I was moving, go to the Bowery. But although I passed through many dangers, I never thought, quote, that this is danger. Everywhere I thought, this is my home, unquote. April 1966. Someone broke into room 307 while Srila Prabhupada was out and stole his typewriter and tape recorder. When Prabhupada returned to the building, the janitor informed him of the theft. An unknown burglar had broken the transom glass, climbed through, taken the valuable, and escaped. As Prabhupada listened, he became convinced that the janitor himself was the culprit. Of course, he couldn't prove it. So he accepted the loss with disappointment. Some friend offered replacement for his old typewriter and tape recorder. In a letter to India, he described the theft as a loss of more than 1,000 rupees, $157. It is understood that such crime as has been committed in my room is very common in New York. This is the way of material nature. American people have everything in ample, and the worker gets about 100 rupees as daily wages. And still, there are thieves for want of character. The social condition is not very good. So Prabhupada had, it's 6:55 more minutes. Prabhupada had told Joseph Forster, the India ticket agent, that he would be returning to India in a couple of months. That was 7 months ago. Now, for the first time since his arrival, Prabhupada has returned to the India ticket office in Brooklyn. He talked about the theft to Mr. Forrester, who responded with, quote, welcome to the club, unquote, and told Prabhupada about the recent theft of his own automobile. Such things, he explains, were not unusual for New York City. He told Prabhupada of the danger of the city and how to avoid thefts and muggings. Prabhupada listened, shaking his head. He told Mr. Forster that American young people were misguided and confused. He discussed his plans for returning to India and showed Mr. Forster one of his Bhagavatams. Prabhupada had lost his spirit for living in room 307. What would prevent the janitor from stealing again? Harvey Cohen and Bill Epstein had advised him to relocate downtown and had assured him of a more interested following among the young people there. It had been an attractive proposal, and he began to reconsider it. Then Harvey offered Prabhupada his studio on the Bowery. Harvey had been working as a commercial artist for a Madison Avenue advertising firm when a recently acquired inheritance had spurred him to move into a loft on the Bowery to pursue his own career as a painter. But he was becoming disillusioned with New York. A group of acquaintances addicted to heroin had been coming around and taking advantage of his generosity, and his loft has recently been burglarized. He decided to leave the city and go to California. But before leaving, he offered his loft for Prabhupada to share with David Allen. David Allen had heard that Harvey Cohen was moving to San Francisco as if he could sublet his AIR loft. Harvey hadn't known David very long, but on the night before Harvey was supposed to leave, he coincidentally met David 3 different times in 3 different places on the Lower East Side. Harvey took this as a sign that he should rent the loft to David, but he specifically stipulated that the Swami should move in too. As Prabhupada was preparing to leave his 72nd Street address, an acquaintance, an electrician who worked in the building, came to warn him. The Bowery was no place for a gentleman, he protested. It was the most corrupt place in the world. Prabhupada's thing had been stolen from room 307, but moving to the Bowery was not the answer. Hare Krishna, 6:55. We should stop here. And the devotees who has to go to the work, we would like to offer our humble obeisances at the desk of that lotus feet. Vancha kalpatarubhasya kipashandubhaivacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaisnavebhyo namo namaha. So thank you very much. If anybody has any question, comment, correction, chastisements, Sudhir Krishna Prabhu is living soon. Hari Bol. It is so nice to see Yugal Priti Mataji didn't get a sleep. So she joined so early, so I asked her, what happened? Why you joined so early? She wrote, I couldn't go to sleep. That's very nice. I said, Krishna is so kind to you. So you can chant a little more. But who can do that, you know? Not many. They will toss around in the bed and they have their fixed time. And that's what they do, right? Yes. But Yugal Priti Mataji was something different, unique. I think same thing Sarvasakti Mataji does that sometime from Portland, Oregon. When she runs late of the house program, she will stay and finish the round and then go to sleep.